What's going on, Beta?
I'm doing.
Hey guys.
Apologies, BetaRay. I called you Bill again. It's an old habit, but I swear.
It's
All
fine.
right.
I blame Ev.
Okay, so I'm going to kick this off with. I'm not going to start at the beginning of the movement. I'm going to go further back than that. Before this player's voice movement was even a concept, where were each of you in respect for your relationship with this game?
Well, I'll start off. I was very much on the way out. I had seen a lot of my friends leave, and I was contemplating, just quitting at that time, and that's exactly where I was.
So I had contemplated quitting in October, and I ended up getting moved up to lead a large cluster within the game. And even then, it was still kind of like, I don't know if I want to be in MSF anymore. Like the game just didn't seem like it was very much fun the way it was.
Yeah, you guys are so short.
Is BetaRay have to do the verbal version of Evdog is typing?
Yeah, I guess so. So, I mean, I think we're all in a similar boat, right? So I was also at a point of sort of, reevaluating my involvement in the game. For me, I was part of, as Ev was and others, I was part of a top alliance, Pants of Hope, for a bit of time. And I'd say around October, I think, or so of 2022, there was just starting to be so much downward pressure, specifically on the top alliances from retirements, players stepping back, that basically for us, a decision was made to either try to merge that alliance with another one or to just fold. And basically, half of the alliance was kind of done with the game at that point, and the others really wanted to stick around and finish the apocalypse journey, because obviously we all invested a lot of time and effort in preparing for that, unlocking the horsemen and going through all the sagas and all of that. And so basically half the alliance scattered to the wind, went to other alliances. We helped them get spots. And then a number of us quit, or a few of us actually stayed in the old alliance shell and just took it easy for a while, to sort of reevaluate our relationship with the game. It was kind of nice. It was a nice vacation, right? Basically just log in, do dailies. Nobody really cared to do raids, but maybe once a week. You could show up and do war hits if you wanted, but it didn't really matter. And so this just went on for a while. And for me, after a few months of that, I started to reassess what was it that kept me in the game in the first place. And it was a realization that it was about the community. It was about my friendships, my relationships with other players. And so I started to get back into that aspect of it again. That was something that I really missed, right? The hanging out, the achieving goals together. We used to do a lot of things on voice chat, helping each other out. And so I actually ended up stepping a little bit back into it, helping some friends that were in Sex Panthers, another alliance, and sort of got re-engaged through that, but still had my doubts, right? Like I think everybody here, that the game was going to improve.
So next question is for Evdog. I know originally this wasn't actually your idea, but you ended up getting roped into leading it, and what a hell of a job you were doing. Tell us a little more about that. Like how did you end up getting into this?
Well, as I said, I was on the way out. I was contemplating leaving, and I think I had a conversation with Dorky Dad, and Dorky convinced me to stay and fight the fight a little bit more. He said, "Hey, Dorky and I had separate contacts with the devs, and I think the original concept was we would start this movement. He could work his magic through the envoy contacts. I could work my magic through the player experience contacts, and we could see if we could actually make a change." The original plan was to be a little bit more aggressive than it turned out. And then as we started to put it together, I think life hit Dorky. And he kind of fell off the map because he just had a lot of things going on. I think he had a new child. He had a bunch of things going on, and it ended up just being me. And luckily, through a couple of the people we had in the server, because I think when we started with just a few people, a few of the top alliances. We always intended to grow it to a full movement, but we wanted to see if we could even bring together, if we could handle the pressure on a small scale first. So I think we brought in the leaders of the top 20-ish alliances. There's maybe about 25 people total in the server. One of them was Sevi, and luckily Sevi quickly took the place of what Dorky was supposed to do, and that's how it started.
So I mean, I know the early days were pretty nutty for you guys, and I remember even when you were starting to do this, you had DM'd me myself early on, and I know at that, and it was really, really quickly understood you were DMing a lot of people. Almost where the community meme of Evdog is typing kind of got originated. So
Yeah.
how many DMs did you send out to get this thing kicked off?
Anybody that knows me knows, and I think a lot of the people in the movement, or even a lot of the alliance reps, they know that I try to stay personal with a lot of the people, especially in trying to, get this thing together. So I basically DM'd everyone. Like I DM'd everyone, even when we did the state of the game report, we DM'd like about 200, 300 people with it. It's just probably part of how I communicate with people. I mean, I feel you can put out a general message, and maybe people see it and maybe people don't see it, but I think that people react and feel a little bit more involved when you send them a DM. So that's basically always been the way that I communicate, and yeah, probably the way Evdog is typing got started.
That was it was one of the funniest things. I think the first time I saw the meme actually was from a content creator, Taco Shooter. It was the first one to put it in the Discord, and it's just stuck ever since. Sevi, I know Evdog answered this partially, but how did you get roped into this?
So I got promoted at WPF to take over as the collective president, and part of that meant I got added to this server that Ev had started with Dorky Dad about the letter stuff. And apparently my comment about critiquing their first letter, Ev challenged me on that and asked me to write the conclusion to it. And from there, I just started, offering to help bring in other clusters that I had known of through doing all of the recruiting that I had done before. And have somehow managed to get me into leading this more and like helping him with the administration side. So it was unintentional, but he certainly sweet talked me into it.
Well, then I got to kind of shift over now to Mr. DD6 himself, Beta. Your role is a little bit unique in that you're a consultant. In a consultancy role. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how that kind of came up, or how that got brought in, and what it actually entails for the viewers?
Yeah, so actually it's my own fault. I had actually been hearing about the movement from a few friends that were on the server, and I think it was when the very first letter came out that they started sharing that, and so I started to get a sense for what was going on. For me, it was seeing clearly that the approach that Av and Sevi and others were taking here was to engage with Scopely as opposed to be more of a threatening approach, which some of the prior movements had attempted to do. And I don't begrudge those. They did achieve some goals, but I've never been a big fan of this confrontational approach, because I think you're going to get more success with working with someone than antagonizing them. And so I saw this, and just on a lark, I actually happened to reach out to Ev and to Sevi and said, hey, similar to what Ev was saying about he had a relationship with somebody at Scopely, I also had some relationships with some folks there. Just through time, you sort of develop those. You know, I think somebody talked about it the other day that they think there was or has been a hidden Kraken's council, and it's not that. It's that there was call it a VIP manager, if you will, essentially, that was basically kind of like an enhanced contact for support issues, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So alliance leaders like Ev and others, if they had an issue and support wasn't getting it resolved, they could reach out to them. So through that process, you sort of established a relationship. But in my particular case, I had actually had the opportunity to broaden that and had quite a number of face-to-face meetings with a number of folks at Scopely over the past probably about 2 years or so. And through that, I actually found, you know, there's a lot of perceptions, and I understand where it comes from in the community, that Scopely doesn't know its own game, or you know that they don't play their own game, or they don't have experience engaging with the players very well. I can understand again why people had that perception, but the people that I met with, if people could meet these people, they would get a completely different impression. You know, they're very knowledgeable, they're very understanding, they're very engaging, and so I reached out to Ev and Sevi and said, hey, I see what you guys are doing. If you need some help, just let me know. I can tell you what my experiences have been in working with these folks. I can do some introductions if that's helpful. But, you know, I've been down this path a bit. And I also had spent a bit of time over the past couple of years bringing forth a lot of these suggestions that we're trying to get through, including a players council. And so I knew what that experience was trying to navigate the waters of Scopely, if you will. So that's how I got started. It was really my own fault. I opened my mouth, and you know the old adage, you know, you step into whatever you throw in front of yourself. So.
Well, we're in a better place because you did. So, thank you.
Indeed. So you guys got brought in, and the server began to build, but it wasn't fully public yet. But there was the think tank that put forward that first letter that you've mentioned to the developers. How long did that process take? And was there anything contentious or maybe even popular that didn't make the cut in that first letter?
Well, there was. It took us about a month, and you know, a lot of that will, you know, people will tell you is because, as you know, I type very slow, so it took me quite a bit to type that 2-page letter. But but you know, we went through it with all the alliance leaders. What we did was we had a process, the same process we did for the State of the Game report, where we asked them what were the most pressing issues. We voted on them. We picked the top 6. We discussed each one separately and how it affected. And we were looking to put very general requests, because we were coming from a place, at that time we had not gone public, and it was coming from a place of only about the top 20 alliances being involved in this, and we didn't want to risk the assumption that we were only looking to benefit those top 20 alliances. So we tried to be we tried everything that we felt benefited every single person, top to bottom. And I will say, in terms of what that first letter was supposed to be, we, you know, I don't know if this is a bad thing to say, but we weren't really expecting a lot of traction from that letter. We understood that we were in it for the long haul. What that letter was really to say, hello, we're here, and we're forming, and we're organized. And I wasn't concerned with what their response was going to be. We were going to react accordingly based on their response, but that was always just the opening move of what we saw as a long-term effort to get a better position with them in communication. You know, putting a letter out and getting 3 things done and calling it done like that, in my opinion, was never going to solve anything long term, you know. But starting a record of communication, starting a history of communication, that was the true intent of that first letter.
And then very shortly after that, you took the server public, and just like that, thousands of people joined immediately. You know, so what were the initial challenges that you had to handle with that kind of growth, and you know, all at once? You know, especially I bet moderation was a nightmare in the beginning.
We had auto mod turned on pretty early. We did a soft launch essentially on that. We started with the main people that we had in the server initially, and then we reached out to specific clusters and alliances that we were aware of to try to get some of the alliance reps in over the weekend. And grew that from about 25 to a little over 300 that first weekend, just because we knew how much work it was going to be rolling everyone in. And it just felt like it was going to be super crazy once we went fully public. So we did a little bit of a soft launch there, and we went fully public that following Monday and hit 3,000 members the first week. And thank God we have such amazing moderators, because there's no way Evan and I could have handled that on our own. There were a lot of people trying to figure out suggestions, directing people around, answering some of the same questions over and over, like, what's the movement doing? What's the purpose of this? How do I do this? How do I do that? We had people putting together FAQ channels. We have a really great admin team who is just on top of the ball the entire time. So it took a lot of people to get everything done here. And it basically became like a 24/7 thing. Like the server never really went quiet initially. Lots of people had lots of ideas on how things should be done.
Yeah, big shout out to the mod team. I mean, I've seen firsthand how hard they work, in front and behind the scenes. No shout out to the auto mod though, because it still makes me fall foul with the language filter. I keep getting caught occasionally when I drop one without realizing it. Anyway, shortly after the server went live, you got the reply back from Scopely from that first original letter with the promise of an iteration of a number of things, and very quickly we got the automatic raid keys and the change to war attacks to 10. How did this make each of you feel that you got such a quick and positive response? And was this the moment where you thought to yourselves, that this could really work?
Well, the first letter, we got the raid keys, but we didn't get the war energy. The war energy stuff came after the state of the game report. The first letter we got back, they addressed a few issues. They addressed the apocalypse issue, which, they had to address anyway. And they addressed the raid key issue with a promise to do it. And then the other issues, they kind of sidestepped. And we were fine with that. We expressed to them that we weren't happy with the response, which was sort of surprising to them, because their response initially was more like Band-Aid fixes for, for things that we thought needed a full overhaul. And we explained that to them. And that conversation, just to step back, when we first got the response, I was disappointed, because I was concerned that they just didn't see the overall picture like we did. And then we had a follow-up meeting where the way that they responded gave me hope, because they were open to listening to us. They didn't immediately shoot down the things we were telling them that didn't work for us. And they actually said, hey, you know what? We're going to take this back to the lab, and we're going to see if we can come up with better solutions to what you're asking. And that's when we started working on the overall concept of the state of the game report. The state of the game report, we wanted to include everything. We heard that, the letter was just a 2-page letter with a few questions, and a lot of people found that lacking. They felt we left out a lot of things. They felt it wasn't aggressive enough. They felt, a lot of things. And we understood that, but that letter was never intended to be a full showing of what we wanted. So we worked on the state of the game report, which was the 40-page document that we sent them. And when we sent them that's when we got the responses that we were looking for. That's when, it was well received. They as they told us, you know, a lot of the data that we sent was data that they could now look at and match up from, you know, whether it matched player perception. And that gave us hope to move forward. And the biggest thing was that they agreed to the Players Council.
Yeah, that was a huge win for 100%. You know, and ironically, the server kept growing, and you guys instituted a lot more structured feedback process. You know, I know you've gone through a lot of iterations with the suggestion features, as well as numerous focus groups and other channels to give responses to specific things. You know, what would you say, or is this how you envision it would work, or, you know, what hasn't worked? You know, how would you want to improve that going forward for everyone that's kind of participated in that feedback forum?
That's a Sevi question.
So we tried to make the process a little bit earlier or easier for people to give their feedback, understand how the process is going to work. I'm not sure that it's, you know, in its final iteration. I know that the bot that we're using is a lot easier than the initial bot.
It really is.
But we're working on ways to kind of show people how their suggestions are being implemented, because our initial thought was, you know, we're going to pass these over, but it's not stuff that we're going to follow up on because we have so many other goals that we're looking at.
Yep.
But now that we've kind of gotten past that phase, it's something that we're trying to see how we can get that pushed forward a little bit more and get the feedback so people don't feel like they're just shouting into the void again, you know?
I'm going to quickly say there are polls up on the Discord nearly every day. Please take part in them, because again, this is data that does go back to Scopely and does help form a lot of the things going forward to them.
I'll add to that you know, there's also other things. As you said, we do have focus groups. Like, we put quite a few of the people that applied in buckets. So there's spending bucket focus groups, there's new player focus groups, there's international player focus groups. You know, we're probably going to start a war and raid focus group. You know, we're constantly trying to improve. We're constantly trying to figure out ways to take in the information in a way that we can give it back to Scopely in an organized manner. Even the way that we put together the reports, we did that mainly through the Alliance reps, who I'd like to give a shout out to. A lot of that, the state of the game report, was direct input from them, where once a day we would put out, what about this part of the game? What are your views on it? And we would get feedback. We would take that feedback, we would put it in a report, we would put it to the side. Then the next day we would put another topic, and we would take that feedback. So we're constantly, and we'll continue to constantly try to upgrade our server to be more transparent and actually correctly represent the voice. I think one of the main things that we're doing now is we're trying to put together something that shows what we're doing currently, like what our interactions are currently in the movement and with the Players Council. What are we asking for? And be a little bit more transparent so the community themselves can just click in and follow. I think we'll have something like that in a couple weeks. We did start that, but it kind of fell to the wayside because so many things was going on. Mm-hmm. But we do recognize that we need to show a little bit more what's going on. That's where we're at now.
We'll make sure we cover it when it comes out. I will say, yeah, the focus groups are amazing. I'm a member of the international community one, and some of the discussions that take part in there, some really eye-opening stuff. So, much like the first letter, after a lot of feedback that you've just mentioned gathered, the state of the report did come out, which got a very quick response on certain topics, especially gold. Gold one came out, flew out of the gate. They replied to that quickly, and we got some huge changes almost immediately, like with the war season rewards. Much like the first letter, though, was there anything that you had to leave on the shelf that you wanted to put in, either because there was already too much to focus on, or because it's an issue that Scopely's kind of drawn a line in the sand on, and there's no point pushing it any further?
The biggest one, I would say, which they kind of pushed down the line for both letters, I guess, would be the conversion mechanic. One thing we've been asking for is for them to provide a way for us to utilize all the, blue mats and, unused mats that just sit there and accumulate in the thousands. And they haven't said no. They just haven't really given us a yes. My guess is it's a technical issue. We will keep starting to push that, keep continuing to push that, but that's the biggest thing that comes to mind in terms of something that they've, continued to kind of be a little, iffy on answering.
Yeah.
Bill could probably answer a little of this more.
I think one thing I would like to add to this too is we talked about that the biggest thing, I know this was in one of the very first conversations I had with Ev and Sevi, is I said, we're putting this 40+ page document in front of them. There's a lot of meat there. There's a lot of ask. What is the one major thing that if we get a victory on that allows us a solid path forward? And that was an agreement to get the player council going, right? We mentioned that earlier today. But I think the important thing that I want to bring up here, because I see this come up nearly every day in conversations with people. When Scopely agreed to the concept of a player council, they were very adamant at the time that it be formed by just spenders. And one of the things that I respected hugely from Sevi and Ev's position about this was that was a non-starter. And so we were able to push back on them and get them to agree that there is value in having all levels of representation as part of that council, whether they're spend or not. And what's interesting is these conversations that I see or we get into with various people on a daily basis is that a lot of free-to-play players have a perspective that everything's being run by the top end, and ironically the top end players sort of think everything in here is being run by the free-to-play players. The reality is there's a whole mix here, and there's a whole bunch of perspectives, but the fascinating thing for me that I don't think people really understand or realize is that a lot of these issues that people think are unique to their level of play is universal, right? When we talk about gold, that's a problem for everybody. When we talk about blue ISO 5, that's an issue everybody has. It's just at different levels, right? But everybody has that issue. So I hope that people, as they listen to this and as they interact, that they start to understand, sure, there's some unique issues with various levels, but there's a lot more commonality than there is differences between that. And so I think that's the biggest thing that we could have hoped for that came out of that, and that allowed the next phases of evolution for all of the other issues that were in the document, which again, even though it was over 40 pages and was fairly comprehensive, was not everything, right? It may have felt like it. There's always a lot more than that, but this allowed a process to be put in place for us to have an ongoing engagement and relationship with Scopely to address not only the issues, but also the future. Where are they going? What ideas are they thinking? And the council has an opportunity to help shape those things.
Well, let's talk about the council for a second, because I think, it was starting to form very similar to the time we got the response from the letter. It started with an appointed interim council. Can you kind of talk about how that came up and how that was decided?
So when they gave us the approval for the council, we said, okay, it's going to take us so long to get this all set up because we wanted to do, some application process and voting, so people had a choice about who was going to be representing them. And at first we were just like, okay, so this is going to take a little bit longer for us to actually start doing anything. And Scopely came back and said, appoint an interim council so we can start working on things. And we looked at people who had been active in the server and whose opinions that we felt broadly reflected what we were seeing in the server, and took 5 people from that as part of the interim council, and they were in there for maybe 2 to 3 meetings before we got our elected council in place, and got some stuff done, gave some really good feedback. But now we have our elected council, so.
Yeah, now that we've got that fully elected by the members of the Players Voice Discord as well, again, another reason you should join the Discord if you haven't already, folks. Give us an idea as to the scope of how involved that whole election process was. You know, how many people applied per area, and the whole process of appointing a committee just to do a blind approval for the shortlist that went to public vote.
So we had a significant amount of applications. We had 130 for eight spots. You know, obviously we had more people that applied for free to play adjacent, and mid-level spenders. We had probably about 12 applications, maybe 15 for Krakens. The free to play was probably around 25 to 30, and free to play adjacent, mid-level made up the rest of those. We had to go through and, well, actually, I went through and scrubbed all of the applications before, so that way it was a blind process throughout the entire time. Nobody knew exactly whose application was whose when they were reviewing it, because we wanted this to be fair and not be a biased process at all. So I had a group of 8 people who volunteered to kind of go through the applications and narrow them down to our finalist candidates. And they reviewed all of the 130 scrubbed applications, narrowed it down to our top 5 to 7 per bucket. I took those 5 to 7 that were approved, sent them over to Scopely to verify a few things. Number one, that they gave us truthful information regarding their spending. I didn't get numbers. I just was like, this is the range. Does this match what they've given us? Number two, you know, that they hadn't been abusive or harassing to anyone in customer support, because it was very important for us that these people be able to communicate effectively with Scopely employees, and that Scopely didn't feel like, you know, they were going to be on the receiving end of abuse, because that's not really how you conducive to how you build a relationship. Right. And lastly, we just also wanted to make sure that there weren't any other flags on their account or anything like that. And Scopely came back. We didn't really have that many issues with candidates, so that was pretty great. And then we started doing our voting process, and you know, it was over 4th of July, so that was a little bit difficult for people to be participating. You know, 4th of July is a big holiday for Americans, not so much for international, but that stuff we took into account, and we did 1 bucket per day, posted out all of the scrubbed applications for the candidates that made it through, and took the top 2 candidates to represent that bucket for the player base.
Well, so as this is the, you know, the past up to this point, the journey so far, and that's kind of the main topic of today's stream, is our inaugural journey so far. Let's talk about the future. You know, we've got more gold. You know, we've got better quality of life for raid leaders, a little more freedom of choice. You know, we saw Cosmic Crucible changes with some recommendations that people had done from these conversations. What's next for the player voice movement? Is there going to be another letter? Like, kind of highlight a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I think I could probably jump in on this one. So I don't know that I foresee another letter 3, if you will, at this point, right? We're engaging, the council's engaging, it's really positive conversations. One of the things, obviously, is everybody wants change yesterday, and, you know, we've got a long process and road ahead of us. You know, we have to get through the discussions and the agreement, and then there's development time, or, you know, all those things come into play that, unfortunately, we can't just, you know, Thanos snap it and a particular change happens tomorrow. But I would say that the biggest 3 things, at least we believe from our perspective, I sort of joke about that if we model ourselves after Sesame Street, that today is going to be sponsored by the letter E. So the biggest 3 things that we believe are the highlights right now are the economy, events, and the experience. And by experience, I'm talking about new player experience, right? And how that process is for catch-up mechanics and so on. And those are really three really big topics, right? Economy really touches everything. So when people talk every day about we need more gold or we need more mats or we need more blue ice or whatever, all of these touch the economy, and a lot of the game modes touch the economy. And so this is not something that we jointly can solve overnight. It's a conversation and a process. Um, and so those are the big three. Economy centers around things like bottlenecks, resources, progression, the cost for the pay-to-play players, the availability for the free-to-play players. When new items are brought in, you mentioned earlier about we're starting to see in Blitz and in Dark Dimension level 100 characters in there, and also Gear 19 characters. So obviously seeing them there, you can kind of forecast that at some point in the future we'll see those in game. And so all of these things touch the economy. And so that's a very, very big one. And then we talked earlier about events, making sure we're not burning people out. Somebody mentioned earlier on one of the suggestions about how alliance level events are run. So, we want to be able to address these things. We have successfully addressed, thanks to Scopely, the hoarding events, which everybody sort of universally hated. Yep. We know that impacted some of the resources as a result of those events. So we know that there's more work to be done on that side of it. But those are the kinds of things that we hope to address going forward. And then the biggest thing is to keep a stable game community. You need a constant flow of newer players coming in, and how they learn, how they grow, how they can catch up to the sort of the bottom end of the end game, if you will. A lot of those, there's a lot of things, conversion mechanics mentioned earlier. There's a lot of things centered in these three topic areas. So in addition to all that, we've also got the sort of the more tactical things that are going on a day in and day out basis, right? Especially lately about bugs and QA and all of that ongoing stuff that we're trying to help out where we can. And I have to say, I mean, yeah, this is probably the most buggy release. I think everybody sort of universally agrees that we've had in recent times.
Yep.
But they've really been busting their butts to try to get through a lot of these issues as fast as they possibly can. It's hard because obviously as a player, when you're locked out of the game or you're locked out of a game mode or you're in the process of doing a crucible battle or whatever, and you get blown out, it's frustrating, right? And so we get that, and I know Scopely knows that. But I think their responsiveness to this stuff has been really, really engaging in helping to get through it. So to me, those are the three biggest things that I could say that we talk about is the three E's: the economy, the events, and the experience.
That's an excellent way of phrasing it as well. I think that can gain some really good traction. I want to thank you three for coming on today. It's really, really appreciated. I've learned quite a lot actually from this interview, and I'm sure many other people listening have learned too. But before you all go, I started this by asking you all where you were with your relationship to the game before the movement started. Where are you all now?
Well, for me, I'm a lot more. I'm a lot more hopeful. I do like the way that Scopely has engaged us. Even when you look at what happened this patch with the bugginess of the patch, I don't know if people see it the way that I see it, but in the past, when things went wrong, it felt a lot more like they went wrong because Scopely just didn't care, or they, or they were just, their only purpose was to try to just get us for as much as they could. This patch, I feel like a lot of these mistakes happened because they were trying to do too much. They're scrambling to try to fix a lot of things, and I just think they're trying to do too much. And we already know that Scopely is very much prone to mistakes. So, even in that aspect, when, I can live with them trying and us working to a place where, everything is right. Like, at least I know that it can happen, that we could get there. And that's the difference between now and when I started and when we started the movement. When we started the movement, I had the feeling that they didn't really care. This was never going to get fixed. You know, they're never going to listen to us. And now that's not the case. I wanted to say in my final comments that, you know, the fact that they're trying, the fact that they're trying, the fact that we have this open communication is the big win. And things are just not going to get fixed right away. There is always a process, you know, and if we look at the fact that we do have a process, we do have communication, we do have an open window to fix things, it should make everybody feel better.
For me, you know, I feel like just being able to work with Scopely, and specifically the people that we work with are so amazing. I wish that the rest of the community could see them, because they would know how much they care about the game and players' experiences and how things are affecting all of the player base. Seeing this, you know, behind the scenes, and how they really take everything to heart, and they want to be able to make this work, has been an amazing experience for me, and it's kind of turned around where I was at the game. You know, I love my alliance mates. I think they're great. I like working with everybody that's within my collective. And, you know, working with everybody through the movement's been amazing. The community is great. But also really getting to know the people behind Scopely, whether that's just the specific experience team that we've worked with, or, you know, the various people that we've gotten to engage with while we were doing our presentations and trying to get the council in place, has been a great experience as well.
I guess for me, closing this out, so it's fun for me when I hear people quoting my words. So I will say my perspective is that I continue to stand, quote, cautiously optimistic. I noticed Mobile's been using my words lately too. I feel like we've made progress on a lot of things. Some are behind the scenes that probably aren't as visible. Echoing what Sevi said, I think if people had an opportunity, and there's reasons why, but if people had an opportunity to get to know some of these folks at Scopely, they'd see that there's some really bright people there, and that they do care and they're passionate about the game and stuff. But for me, I think anybody would be a fool to just throw caution to the wind and say everything is completely on the right path now. It's a journey, you know, and I've used the example that this is sort of like guiding a ship from Florida to New York, or actually Florida to New York, and just a minor degree difference in how we navigate that thing as we take off. We could end up in Europe instead of New York. So, you know, little things along the way, we're going to have blips, you know, and as long as we're generally taking 2 steps forward, we might have the occasional 1 step backward, but as long as it's generally in a forward direction, I think that's a positive thing. For me personally, it's still about the friendships and the community and my alliance mates, and the game sort of brings everybody together on this journey. I encourage people to stay cautiously optimistic, right? But come join, as you guys have said, come join the server. The voices are heard, right? There's lots of conversation, lots of dialogue that goes on there. Sometimes it's people bitching, which, you know, that's life. We all get frustrated with things, but the best thing people can do is come with some positive suggestions. You know, this doesn't work, but maybe if they did this, right? They don't always have all the answers. We don't always have the answers. The community actually really does have a lot of ideas that are really valuable. And so I think if people can bring that forward and give us the ammunition, if you will, to carry other ideas forward, I think we're going to have this movement for a very, very long time.
Well, all right, thank you very much. Just a quick shout out to Dorky Dad, who's raided with a party. Hello, welcome to the first of our many shows going forward. Unfortunately, we're just wrapping up today, but you will be able to catch a replay of this on YouTube coming up very shortly.
Let me ask you guys this, because I think as I'll speak first for Northern Goblin myself. Thank you, all you three, for everything you guys do for the community. Thank you for you know, creating an avenue, a medium that we can present information, and all your feedback kind of gives back to the community so they can see firsthand what's happening, that nothing is going to waste. But can you guys give a little bit of a preview of like what can the viewers expect from the show going forward?
I think what we're hoping is, as Ev was saying in the beginning, a lot more transparency into what we can communicate about. So I think a combination of, we'd like to be able to get out there with, as you guys talked about earlier, here's the top suggestions, here's where things have been implemented. We'd love to give people that feedback. I know ideas that are solicited and implemented are kind of fun when it gets implemented. I know Dorky and I both had coincidentally idea when they came to the community, or some people in the community, for suggestions or ideas for this new round of Crucible. The two of us coincidentally both had the same idea about a room that would take raid buffs into account. And to see that come to fruition, I think is really, really fun. I don't think either of us anticipated how toxic Bifrost was going to be in that room, but you know, it is fun to see those kinds of changes happen. So I think it's, you know, the feedback of here's your suggestions, here's where it's gotten implemented, and then anything else that we're able to have an impact on, as long as we can show that the progress in that journey, as I was talking about a minute ago. I think that's what this channel is about.
I also want to add that what we hope to do in the future is really just educate the community. I think one of the best things that's happened being part of the movement is listening to the devs and actually understanding what they're trying to do, and also the roadblocks that they have in trying to do it. You know, like myself, and I'm sure a lot of people, when I see mistakes or when I see certain things that are negative for the community, I 100% immediately think that was on purpose. Oh, they're doing this to gain more this, or they're trying to pull more money. And sometimes it's really not that. I'm hoping to, in the future, to not just educate the community, but hopefully get some of the Scopely people on here for interviews and have the community have a little bit more sense of who they are and what they're trying to do, so that they can feel a little bit more comfortable in the game that they're putting so much time and money into. That's one of my biggest goals.
All right. Does anybody have any other closing remarks they want to make before we wrap this up?
No, none for me. I think I'm good.
I think I'm good too.
All right. Well, again, huge thank you for
Dorky Dad.
and for everything that you guys do. It's really, really appreciated.
And definitely blame Dorky for the raid buffs if you don't like it in Crucible. If you like it, then I'll take the credit for that.
Blame Dorky for everything. Just blame. He's in Canada, so.
Yeah, this was absolutely great. It was awesome to do this. Again, thank you guys for doing what you guys do. Thank you for allowing us to be able to co-host this. Thank you to the viewers for hanging out with us tonight. You know, we will be back in 2 weeks. You know, we'll have some more updates, and I'll let Northern close it out.
I was going to say, thanks to you, Reaper, because this was the first show, and you've been involved very much in the technical side of setting all this up. I just sit here, try and look pretty, fail at doing that, and talk to a camera.